This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Kelli Lester, and she is the co-founder and partner of Onyx Rising, a consulting firm specializing in transforming individual, team, and organizational behavior. With more than 2 decades of experience in leadership development, coaching, and change management, Kelli is passionate about fostering environments where inclusive leadership and employee well-being thrive. Named one of EBONY's 30 Young Leaders of the Future, she has had a proven track record of driving sustainable impact and empowering organizations to unlock their potential. Whether consulting, coaching, or advocating for equity, Kelli is a dynamic voice for meaningful progress and innovation. So Kelli, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just get a little context. Give us a little background on, where you grew up and how you got to where you are now, and just give us a little summary.
All right. So I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was the child that oftentimes wanted to experience new things, even if it was uncomfortable for myself. And the way I would describe it is I will often leave my core friends and want to learn new things, and would come back and stay connected to that core, which I think was the beginning stages of me getting into the space of diversity and inclusion, just to have lived experiences, whether I knew that language or not.
Yeah.
I was oftentimes the only in a lot of environments that I was in, the only African American, the only female, because of that curiosity. And later on, I went into a career in media. I thought I wanted to be Oprah. It didn't work out. But it gave me some great skills. So I majored in communications and went to Ball State University under what I like to think of as a great friend. There you all have David Letterman had created the telecom department and really uplifted it at Ball State. And that was really the impetus, at least I was part of the first class, if you will, to go into that major. So I came out, spent about a decade in media, working at first the theater, then the Black newspaper, and then later the local Black radio station. And that is where I discovered my love for inclusion and diversity and equity. I was given a project to recruit people into our industry that were people of color. And so I went to my alma mater, Ball State, started recruiting folks into our internship program, and started to notice what we call now a revolving door. And I knew in my heart, I had to understand what was making people stay and what was the reason we were losing people, and what was their demographic, what were the common themes across that. And through that experience, I grew the program, but I also then I got promoted into human resources in our corporate office, and then really started to fall in love and learn that diversity, equity, and inclusion had a whole career. And that the reason some people were leaving wasn't so much the culture, it was the leader that they were really quitting, so to speak, versus the organization. And so we didn't have a problem recruiting, but we did have a problem retaining. And that is really what opened the doors for me to understand the role of leadership, the role of culture, and the role, if you will, of recruiting, and how that can really help to drive the business and then also maintain or sustain the culture. And from there, I went on to do that work in larger corporations like Sara Lee, and moved to Chicago, was there for about 20 plus years, and then eventually worked in consulting for a decade. Came back to my hometown, did a little consulting for about a year, and then went to the firm full time, Onyx Rising. So we started Onyx Rising in 2016, and it has two business units. One is inclusive leadership and innovation, which really is that DEI work, strategy development, leadership development, and a smaller business, which started first, which is our financial literacy side. And we see financial literacy as an employee benefit. So we do go into organizations and attach it to the benefits package, because many employees we lose productivity because people are concerned about finances. And so that's a little bit about me and how I got into the work. And I consider this my occupation. Don't tell anyone, Steve, but I would do it for free.
Yeah.
So I've managed to blend my passion and my work together. So I just enjoy every minute of it.
Well, how would you define inclusive leadership then?
Wow.
Yeah, I heard you use that term. So tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, inclusive leadership is leadership that is done essentially without any or at least minimal bias. So it's really our ability as leaders to lead no matter what the background is of our individual team member or the diversity of our teams. And to do so in a way, I like to put it where we put the person first, versus our own personal leadership style. We don't necessarily push that style on others. And the best way to describe that to me is when we talk about introverts and extroverts. So many times leaders are promoted because they've done a great job as an individual, and we oftentimes don't teach them those leadership skills to do so effectively, to lead effectively, regardless of the starting point or the background of individuals that they lead. And so when I think about introverts and extroverts, I may have been promoted at one point in my life because I was an extrovert, but my ability to be successful in the next leg of my career as a people leader will be dependent upon my ability to lead, even if someone isn't like me. So I would say it's our ability to lead without bias, without even microaggressions, without putting us first, but putting the person and or the organization first.
Well, when we talk about biases, it's you say without bias, and wouldn't you say, or I guess I'll say what I think. I think we all have biases, and so it's just being aware of those biases. It's not like we could expect that we don't have any biases because I think everybody does, but
Yeah.
it's being aware of that so that then you can lead in a way that those biases don't come up front and center.
Absolutely. So we're human, and as humans, we all have biases. The key would be, how do I, one, become aware of my own, so it helps to dictate or how I show up in a room, and it helps me manage and or adjust if need be, so that I can share that room or share that space with other styles versus my style being the only way or the right way. And I think a lot of times people come into this topic with a lot of confusion, thinking A, that it doesn't include their style or their background, and two, that they will be learning about other people and not so much learning about the lens in which the way they see the world. Because once we understand why we see the world the way we do, then it becomes much easier to understand how we show up and to also make adjustments as needed for the greater good of the team. So you're absolutely right. We can't get rid of all biases, but what we can do is minimize them or mitigate them as we lead effectively.
So, as an expert in this, let's call it DEI world, uh, man, it's taken a hit lately. I mean, it's just, it kind of seemed like everyone agreed and it makes sense and we're going forward. And then all of a sudden became something that, is under attack. So, where are we now, and how do you deal with that, being that, you've been in this world for decades?
Yeah, well, I it's a couple things. So having been in the world for decades, it has evolved, right? Even when I started in this work, we didn't call it DEI. So this us getting hung up as a country or even globally on the words is the wrong approach out the gate. So it has evolved, it will evolve, and I would say that people that are practitioners we have to evolve with it. And the way I look at it is, at least our approach, and I only like to work with clients where they're honest about where they are and have a business or mission connection around it. So, what does that look like? The right way to do this, in my opinion, is to connect it to the business or connect it to a mission critical initiative or effort. So, in this season, with all the backlash around it, I have really been coaching and focusing my clients to stick to the core. The core is, what do you do as a business? And if one of the core elements might be selling products or solutions, whether it's one of my clients is they call it through the back of the house, right? So they're a food service industry. If you don't, it's a little bit different than if you have a consumer brand that's business to consumer directly. It's easy, right? So DEI may look like different geographies and markets. It may look like you latch on to this initiative because you're losing your senior leaders in 5 years because they will be retiring and you haven't done knowledge exchange to younger generations. So the way you may address the topic connected to your mission or your business might be through the window of generational diversity or talent or knowledge exchange or innovation. Or if you're nonprofit, maybe it's all around living the mission. I work with the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation here in the city. And one of their overarching missions or objectives is to be sure that they're welcoming to all and that they have books in the library that connect and people can see themselves. So the element around diversity is embedded in their mission. And so as they hire people, promote people, develop leaders, they look at their ability to navigate in with that outcome as the intent. So we're measuring success based upon the outcome of how many books that do we have in the library that have a different lens or promote different characters or promote different identities. And so that, and then in terms of how we behave with one another, you know, if we do engagement surveys, for example, how engaged are all staff? Or do we have remote staff that feel more disconnected or women that feel more disconnected? So I really work with clients to connect it from a business objective perspective or a mission driven perspective. Otherwise, they try to make it everything. DEI is everything. No, it's not. And you're definitely not going to see any progress around it if you look at it that broadly. You really have to look at where your organization strategically needs to put any effort, if at all, around it. And it should be connected to how do we drive business outcomes or how do we drive engagement or productivity. And if you can't have that business value conversation, then you probably should not connect the work in that way, right? Just randomly. Oh, we're going to focus on African Americans. Well, why? How is that helping you drive your business? Or we're going to focus on innovation. Well, we need to be clear that innovation is a bigger objective, strategic objective in our organization. And when you stick to the core, that's when I think people and leaders and organizations are more engaged around it because it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to do it as a nice to have all the time. I'm not saying organizations that see it as it's just the right thing to do are wrong, but if you don't attach it in a very specific business way, it will be the flavor of the month, and you will see what we're starting to see now, which is organizations back away from it.
So are you discouraged, with where we are right now, or do you think we're going to evolve out of this and maybe just redefine it and get to where we need to be? What's your, if I can put you on the spot, what's your take?
Yeah. Yeah, my take is that organizations that were serious about this will continue to be serious about it. And organizations that did not have a strong business case or business value, they will make that strong because they're almost being forced to, right? So yes, I'm not discouraged that the work will stop. I think it may shift in terms of how we talk about it. I think it will shift ownership if it's going to remain. I think there will be organizations that will pull away from it, but I think they may see a potentially might see a business deficit as a result. So, for example, my son is 28 years old and he is in the workforce. He's actually in sales in Arizona. And what I've noticed is this generation, Gen, I guess he would be Gen, he's a millennial. So
Yeah.
millennials and Gen Zs, they see the topic around diversity very different because of the environment that they've grown up in. And their expectations and what they want in a workplace culture is also very different. My generation, Gen X, I think we were closer to baby boomers in terms of the way we looked at it. We stayed a little quiet. We didn't necessarily, many of us don't demand the environment or culture to change. We'll change to fit in with it many times. But this generation is not there. And so if you're an organization that has a workforce demand, this is who we're talking about. Their expectations of how we deal with them as leaders is different. They may want more feedback. They may expect to move up faster. They may expect their organization to be out front on some issues within the community and support the community. And so the question becomes is this important to your workforce? And what is your current workforce? And will that workforce be something that sustains? So I believe that organizations that will be successful will have this embedded, and that's the big shift. And that's what I'm spending quite a bit of time on is, okay, it's not a standalone. How do we embed it? And so inclusive leadership traits and education becomes something we need to embed. And instead of making it a separate training, we embed it into our existing leadership training. When we look at performance management, we need to look at it the same way. Are we truly developing and helping leaders aspire to what we need in our workforce going forward versus where we're at now, especially more innovative organizations on the West Coast? That is huge for them. So you are looking to have a productive, high performing workforce. And the way to unlock that is still around inclusive leadership.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I learned not that long ago, if you look at it now, most organizations have 5 to 6 generations of people. So, you can't, look at it from a baby boomer perspective. You can't look at it from strictly a millennial perspective. You have to, have programs and leadership development and things that go over, 5 generations, which
Yep.
is unique. It didn't used to be that way. There was usually a couple of generations in a workforce.
Right. And there was also a command and control style of leadership that was acceptable in the 80s, right? And even in the 90s. And that style of leadership is not the style of leadership that will take us into the future. And so that's why it's so important that, I know a lot of people are, we have fatigue around this topic, around a lot of the things that are going on in the marketplace. But if we don't shift, we may not exist as an organization, and our style of leadership will be too antiquated to survive. And I think that's really the bottom line. So when you say, will it sustain, and am I discouraged? And the short answer is not at all, because it's ours. You remember Blockbuster?
Yeah, yeah.
Blockbuster saw the signs but never changed, didn't
Yeah.
even listen to their own workforce. And there's many examples out there where if we actually listen to our workforce, we actually can make some of the adjustments needed to sustain our business. But many times when we don't listen, don't look at the marketplace, and we try to stay the same, that's when we see a closed business, right? Sears and Roebuck, right? So we saw that as Walmart, the Walmarts came into play. So it's really a business decision and a talent decision that I see the majority of organizations making, that very specific and sustainable shift. So it doesn't really matter what we call it, right? What matters is, are we meeting the needs of our workforce and our business?
And it seems to me too that when we use the word diversity, I mean, people have focused too much on just race and gender, right? I mean, but it's much broader than that. It's opinions and life experiences and all those other things. And then, as you said, you know, we just need to create teams and businesses and companies where people can find belonging, right? They want to be part of it. They want to feel like this is their people and this is their home and whatever. And so to ignore it, I think is a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how we begin to measure this metric around belonging or inclusion? Do we attach it to our engagement surveys? I have a lot of clients do net promoter score. So I think I think the details are in how we measure leadership success, and also in how we really measure engagement and or inclusion by those different demographics, right? So it's you have flexibility as leaders and organizations to choose what this looks like and to connect it to existing measures. But I think that's really key. Our leadership frameworks have to evolve. If you're still operating as an organization or even as an individual leader off of an old leadership model, it is surely to fail given the diversity. And again, I'm talking generation, style, introvert, extrovert, right? You know, the leadership styles, all of those different measures. But you're absolutely right. When I show people the dimensions of diversity, I have to oftentimes will start out saying we're not looking at just race and gender. Most people know that. But I don't think they really understand, well, what are all those dimensions? If you've been sitting here thinking when you say diversity, you mean women and people of color and not me, then automatically I feel disconnected from the effort. But when we frame the effort that this is how we will drive business or achieve our mission, and here is the new model of what we expect of leaders as you lead. And so to create belonging, I have to know my staff. I have to understand what motivates them. And then I have to show up in that way. I even make sure with my staff, I do my own performance reviews. Like say, hey, tell me, give me feedback. So I don't care if we're big organizations or small, but are we getting feedback from different places? And do we value feedback when it comes from not just our peers? I have clients that only measure success based upon their competitors, and they don't measure success based upon their own viewpoint of their staff or associates. And I think this is a huge mistake because most of the time our answers, whether they're business related, culture related, people related, it relies on our own staff, but we're not asking and we're not listening.
Yeah, yeah, it says, and I think, too, out of those three words, inclusion, might even be the most important, right? Because it's like, you know, you can do things to try and be more diverse, and you can do things to try and be more equitable, but it's really inclusion. If you don't have the inclusion part of it, it doesn't matter because that you have to feel like you're part of this thing.
Yeah, and inclusion should lead, right? Many organizations will say, well, our industry just doesn't have enough people that are even, especially if you look at race, right? You may not be there. The pool of talent isn't there. And so I often will say, well, you need a short term and a long term strategy. You need an air game and a ground game, right? And when I mean air game, that means what is your national strategy? And then what is your local strategy, right? And so when I think about that, I'm thinking about what is it that we need to do here at headquarters and across the globe or across the nation. And what are those items that we need to do to build existing talent? And of course, our recruiters will know we call it build and buy strategy, right? So we'll continue to hire new talent, that's the buy. And then the build is develop the talent you have. But in your culture, making your culture more inclusive is critical even before you get different staff there. If they don't see themselves, that's okay. But even if they were the first, think about it, the first woman, the first younger person, whatever that is the culture and is the leader creating an inclusive environment enough where I would even be successful or stay. And so, yeah, inclusion to me should lead the diversity part, because even if you have diverse talent, they'll leave right out the door if they're not included, right? I mean, and so you can think about this on many, many different dimensions. I work with a client that their world headquarters is in the States, but they have operations all across the globe. And they've gotten feedback repeatedly that you do everything US based, right? And it took them several years, but they finally got it right. And they are speaking to employees or associates at all levels. They're really looking at making sure the people that get opportunities for development aren't just near leadership. I call it a proximity bias, right? So we do have to understand sometimes what are our organizational biases. I talked about the communications company I worked for in Indiana, and they had a college bias, right? They hired, one of the solutions or issues is they were hiring the same type of person, regardless of race or gender, but everybody came from the same school. Everybody had the same style. If you can answer the question, what does it take to be successful here, and have people fill that in, you'll start to get a sense of what your organizational biases are. Well, you need to be a male, you need to live in headquarters, you need to go to this school, you'll need to have a strategic mindset, or you would have came from sales. It starts to help you understand, how do we begin to open things up.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have not heard that before, but that's I think that would be a really great question to ask your people. What does it take? And I'm sure you're going to get some amazing answers when you ask that.
Yeah, and it very interesting, but they will tell you that that will help you unlock what may be a huge block, right? In terms of, I think I have one client that talked about I think they call it a speak up culture, right? And that sounds great, but is that even in and of itself bias? Is that more of an extroversion culture? How does that fly in Asia? Right? When there's some specific ethnicity aspects that make it unsafe for me to speak up culturally. So we just have to think about, our industry, what business we're in. And then I would say, just not try to boil the ocean. Many clients fail in this space when they try to do everything, right, at one time.
Yeah.
You really want to prioritize, what are the biggest issues, what do I start with first? And that's at the organizational level. With leaders, I think it's a little bit easier to go on this journey, even if you're ahead of the culture evolution of your company. And what I mean by that is, what do you need to do? Where are your bias gaps? What feedback might you ascertain from your team in terms of what you can do? So there's always pointing at what the organization can do, but change really does start with us.
Yeah. So I know that you also help companies and corporations put together leadership development programs. So, in relation to what we're talking about now, so you put together these leadership development programs, and how do you address these things? I mean, what is your basic structure and emphasis, on training young leaders to be better executive leaders?
Yeah, I would say, well, the first thing I do process wise is just try to understand current state, right? So I often will ask the client for a lot of data around, your current leadership development programs, training, those kinds of things. Try to understand engagement, because our perception sometimes is human resources leaders or DEI leaders is one thing, but the perspective and hearing from the average employee, I call it two sides of a coin when I do assessments. It's like, one side of the coin is, here's what we put out there. We have training and development, but then when you hear how is it received by direct reports, or even by those middle managers, if you will, themselves, right? Then that's when you really start to find out what the true gaps are. So some kind of assessment or gap analysis or interviews is my first step. And then my second step is, yes, while we obviously have a lot of leadership development training, particularly inclusive leadership traits is probably one of our biggest, most popular solutions in this space. The question then becomes is, how do we deliver, and close those gaps? And sometimes the answer is, let's overhaul and or embed inclusive leadership into existing leader training. That could be one approach. Or that we could teach those learning and development leaders how to embed inclusion models into whatever they're designing. And then, of course, we can obviously just deliver workshops as well. I guess to simplify it, I would say what we do is assess and understand current state. And then we customize our education because education isn't always learned in a classroom. We're very strategic about how this should be delivered, who should deliver it, right? Should it be leader led? So, should it be a learning and development facilitator? Should it be externally a consultant? Should we look at learning pods or mentoring circles or conversations attached to it? So we build the curriculum based upon what works well in that organization, because I have some organizations that classroom learning is just not even what we do. Most people are doing things in self-directed, self-paced, or in bite-sized chunks, right? So I have one client, they call it a playlist. And so once you're hired as a leader or annually each year, they'll say, here's your playlist for the year. And that playlist is customized based on what level leader you are. And so we really create roadmaps or learning maps customized to what is needed in that organization.
Yeah. And my experience has been too, I'd be interested in yours. I do think that younger professionals or younger leaders also learn very well in a cohort or in a group, as opposed to just, doing things online individually or reading online or leading to
Absolutely.
listening to podcasts. So if you're in a group, you can
Mhm.
bounce things off each other, you can reflect together, you can challenge each other, and then that group usually tends to be pretty tight because they've gone through those experiences together.
Absolutely. What you're bringing up is that shared experience and also experiential learning in general. Well, the way we look at our overarching education is very similar, I'm sure, to any other topic. Is we start with awareness, and then we move to skills, and then we move to what I call integration. Because really, you can spend almost 2 or 3 years on awareness if that's where your level is in terms of this topic, inclusion in general. Have you ever introduced it before? How do you introduce it? What is it? Why should we care? That's kind of that initial awareness. And then you could also go into various dimensions, right? The introvert, extrovert, really just broadening people's mind. When you get into skills, what you're bringing up with the cohort is what I call kind of the application, because you can learn the skill, but it doesn't matter if you can't apply it in a realistic way. So sometimes we offer coaching with leaders after that first initial sessions. The other thing we do is strategically start with people leaders first before going to individual contributors. So there's a lot in there, but the base would be, are you at awareness? Are you at skills? Can people really apply this? Is it relevant? So we do a lot of scenarios, role playing, cohorts are often part of it. I like cohorts because people can learn from each other, and it's not just the facilitator bringing the expertise. I can introduce a concept, but how does that play here in your organization? What would that look like? What's the reality of the obstacles that you might face trying to speak up? Right? Or you may not mean it as a leader, right? To bring up, yeah, I love my boss. My old boss told me, I love my idea, but I like yours better. And so, how do I demonstrate that in the way that I lead, right? So, the coaching and the cohort support, I think, does two things. It helps for learning exchange and this value that learning comes from everywhere, and that we value that input. And then I believe on the cohort side, but I believe the coaching helps the leader to really apply what they're learning in a realistic way. Because as my old boss used to also say, my mentor, he was like, education without application is just entertainment, right? And I think that's what a lot of companies struggle with, is that they've invested all these dollars in the training and they don't have that application. So what you're bringing up really helps with application.
Well, it sounds like your approach is very comprehensive and right on. I couldn't agree more. So that's awesome. It's interesting too. It came to mind, do you think that longevity in an organization is a good measure anymore? I'll give you an example. Like some of my clients, baby boomers or Gen Xers, like somebody leaves and they take offense to it. It's like they're just offended that that person would leave, whatever. Yet we know that in the other generations, it's common to switch jobs fairly frequently. And, it used to be, oh gosh, if you switch jobs that many times, you could never get hired again. I don't think that's true anymore. So,
Yeah.
what kind of a measure, because as you said earlier, if you create situations where people feel heard and feel like they belong and feel
Mhm.
a part of it, they're likely to stay longer. But I'm wondering if longevity is a good measurement anymore.
Yeah, I think we have to change our paradigm around it, which is what you're alluding to, in my opinion. And so I'll answer that by giving this example. I do think we need to shift. It depends on the industry and it depends on your organization's culture, because you don't have a lot of fresh ideas if people aren't moving around. And so maybe instead of longevity in one position, think about longevity as what kind of experiences are you offering to talent? So one client, and then this speaks very directly, I think, to what you're asking. They knew they were not going to retain. It was obvious they could not retain young talent, and they started to say, "Well, what can we offer?" So they started to position their internships as experiences, with the expectation that people may only stay 3 to 5 years after the internship. But the question became, are we offering a experience and people would come back, right? So what they discovered is that by positioning it as experiences and managing and changing the expectations of their current leaders, what they were receiving then was a large number of talent interested in the industry, because they had trouble even attracting people to the industry. It was financial services. Like, people don't grow up and say, I want to be an actuary, right? So they were trying to create more attraction into the future pool of talent, and to say, we want to be known as the place to develop talent. No, with the expectation that we know other people may, quote unquote, steal that talent, right? But by doing so, they always kept a young and a crop, if you will, of talent always coming in. And they did build that brand in that way. And they started to see, yes, people did leave, but they also saw a huge boomerang of people coming back, because they'll stay because of the culture. So I think it's both and. We have to change our paradigm shift around our talent strategies, and manage the expectations of leaders that people may not stay, but to decide, what do we want our brand to be out in the marketplace.
Yeah, I know this statement's been around a long time, but it does make a lot of sense, because you bring a leadership development program to a company and they think it's a good idea, but then they look at the price tag, and then people sometimes say, well, what if we spend all this time and money and people and they leave? And then the reverse of that is the answer is, well, what if we don't train them and they stay, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I do think that, the way that I look at it is that when you invest and train people, hopefully they stay. But if they don't, you're also get a reputation for developing good people, and that attracts other people. And
that's
so,
right.
I think it's money well spent. I've always felt it's
Mhm, mhm.
and to do the leadership training programs and do that, and not get hung up on, well, what if they leave, or what if we invest in them and they take it somewhere else. That's where you need to put your little altruistic hat on a little bit and say, well, look what I did for the good of the
Yeah.
right?
And it's a great investment for that Gen Z millennial group, right? Because one of the things, and I hate to keep using my son as an example, but he's a great test example in that the first job he had out of college, he said they literally gave me no training. I was on my own. I had to figure it out. He became like the number three salesperson in the country. So he did okay, but it was a much smaller, not as mature company. This new job he's at, he literally was interviewing with the thought, I want to know what training they offer, right? And so I personally, as a leader, I'm like, okay, he's really putting a whole lot of stock in training. But and so I help to coaching that's great, and the leader style, who you're interviewing with, right? Because I always coach them, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? So I guess I share that example to say an investment into we are good at developing people will be a great investment based upon the trends we see with the younger generation, because that's what they are desperate for. And unfortunately, a lot of our leaders, particularly managers who feel I guess in between. I've got to answer to my executives and I've got to answer to the staff, so to speak. They feel the most pressure, and so sometimes development task of people feel burdensome, right? So if we don't reward that, right, we may not see a shift. So I think it's important to both look at your culture and say, what do we want to be known for? And put that out there in your programs. That's one side of the coin. And then test, ask, ensure, survey, are we doing what we want it to do? And then secondarily, you have to make sure that your leaders also are then activating that which you put on your website. Because many times people are buying, they join the organization, and then they never receive what we said we would deliver.
Yeah, it's like I used to tell people too that, if you ask anybody, well, do you mentor and do you help develop people? And everyone's gonna say yes. But what you need to look at is there a structure and is there examples of
Mhm.
programs or whatever to get that? Because, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I do think that, so many times you see people be successful at entry level or lower level jobs, and then they get
Mhm.
promoted to some leadership position and they have absolutely no, training or experience to be good leaders. So you have to
Mhm.
assume that you don't have to assume, you have to know that uh, to be good leaders, we all have to work at it. It's another skill. You have to practice it. You have to learn about it. It's not something that just happens one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping that top of mind is critical. Absolutely.
So let me ask you about this. Switch gears here a little bit. Ebony's
Okay.
one of Ebony's 30 Young Leaders of the Future. That's quite an award or accolade. To tell us what that means and how that came about.
Well, I was laughing when you introduced me using that part of my bio because I'm no longer young anymore. But I'm young at heart. So yeah, that was really random, meaning you can't apply for that accolade or acknowledgement. You have to be recommended by someone in the community. And I still to this day don't, I have a guess, but I don't know exactly how I ended up in the magazine. My guess is that I'm also in a sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. It was actually founded here in Indianapolis as well, and we were actually hosting our 75th anniversary at the time. So I was rubbing, shoulders with the top leader in the country, and I believe she's the one who recommended me. But to this day, I don't know. But what that really is a collection of leaders. Obviously, with it being Ebony magazine, all of them are African American or multiracial. And what I think the beauty of that acknowledgement is great, but we also were the first group that got all of the people together that was in the magazine that particular year. So that was quite some time ago. I want to say it was like 97. So it was a long time ago. But I think what I learned, I guess, by meeting other individuals that looked like me from various different cities is that we all, as young leaders, had a similar challenge. And I don't know if this is relegated to, African Americans or not, But one of the things I heard as we brought everyone together, we actually started an organization with the commitment to build future leaders because of what we were experiencing. And what we were experiencing is that we were the top young leaders in the city, but we were not seeing the elders developing us. As a matter of fact, what we experienced is a little bit of a threat that we were there, and a feeling as if we were trying to take their jobs or their positions, if you will. So I bring that up, I guess, connected to our conversation around leadership, is that you have to lead in a way that you are going to leave a legacy. And I don't know if every leader is there in their leadership journey at the beginning. It's usually something we think about, once we reach a certain age, right? So when we don't give it away, we don't have a spirit to mentor, teach what we've learned to the next generation. What we are doing is really hurting our cities, our organizations, and our families, or any team, if for that matter, when we don't have a teaching culture or a developmental culture. And then the second thing I guess I would add, connected to that honor, would be that how we lead in a way that isn't for the past, but literally for the present or the future, I think will make a difference in the type of leaders that we will grow. What I mean by that is, I can't lead my son, given that he's a millennial, based on what was successful for me. Those things probably will not make him successful. I have to
100%.
look at what we are up against today in the organization or the city, or whatever the organization is, and also look at where are we trying to go in the future. So if your organization is saying, like, if we don't deal with this talent thing right, and people don't hoard talent and try to keep it in their department, but literally grow that talent and develop that talent by making sure they go to multiple departments or have different experiences, or make sure they have a development plan where they connect to a leader in a different industry or a different department, then we won't make it. We won't have our bench, right? If we don't think about what it's going to take in the next, I have organizations say Vision 2050, right? So whatever our Vision 2050 is, are we building a bench for today, for the past? Are we building that bench for the future? And I would say that was one of my biggest takeaways from being in the magazine, is I thought I was all alone feeling this way. Like, do they not want me here as a leader? Why is no one developing me? And to hear that everyone in all these different cities were having a similar experience actually was super motivating. And we started to help each other, and vowed that we would not be those type of leaders. We would share what we know. I know that it's an old phrase, right? Each one, reach one, or teach one. But with that mindset, it's a big part of my leadership style. I don't hoard what I know. And I feel like every conversation, I get an opportunity to learn more, which is why I think my son and I spend a lot of time talking about this topic of leadership, because I can up my leadership style, or upgrade it, I should say, as I learn more about, what he needs or his experiences as a millennial.
Well, that award was, as you said, quite a while ago, but with your success and accomplishments and accolades, you proved them right. So there you go.
Oh,
Right.
thank you. Thank you.
So, well, you mentioned it earlier, and I'd just like to get your take on it. You used the word occupation. Uh, where did that word come from? Why did you create it? And what
Mhm.
does it mean to you?
Well, I cannot take credit for it. Cherie Nabor, one of my mentors many years ago, really coined that phrase, but I borrowed it. And so I went to her. She was mentoring me and coaching me while I was at the consulting firm in Chicago. And one of the things I remember sharing with her is this expression very vulnerably, that I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. It was almost, I was coming at certain aspects and opportunities with a fear. And I think sometimes women do this, right? Like, I'm not ready. I don't have what it takes. I need more experiences. I need more training. I need more education. I need more time. And she really laid out for me that two things, right? Like for such a time as this. So she was had a more faith-based background, and she started talking about, you are ready and you are chosen. And I guess for those listening in your listening audience, sometimes when opportunity and preparation meet, right? That's when we really can explode. So what does it really look like to prepare? And I think a lot of younger leaders and young people struggle, right? We almost, what I've heard in my coaching is that they feel like they already need to be there. And I'm reminded of Cherie when she said, you don't need to be there already. You've been chosen for the role. And so whenever you put together what you love to do, right, with your job, it's no longer work. And so I guess I put those two things together, right? My occupation and my passion. But also, I'm adding in this conversation today that it doesn't matter if you don't feel ready, right? If you've been put in the position, then it is a divine placement, in my opinion. And everything that you've learned up to this point has gotten you ready for this experience. So you have everything within you to do it. And I think when you operate from this space of passion, in your job, then one, it's fun, and two, the learning and experiences become really different because you look at it very differently. I don't know if that makes sense, but
You make a really good point. And I think that, that is a common thing where people think they need to be as good as someone that's got 25 years experience. But, you just have to trust the process, and you have to realize that we all evolve and we learn and grow. And, of course, we want to be the best and be compared to others. But on the other hand, you have to be patient and trust the process of what that learning and growing does. Experience.
yeah. Yeah, I just always ask myself, and again, for me, I'm a PK, I'm a preacher's kid, so the faith base is very anchored for me. But I learned very early on in my first big promotion. I remember I was in a beautiful corner office, the whole nine, right? I should have, by all intents and purposes, been super excited, but I literally felt scared. And I also felt like, why did they put me here and nobody around me really wants me here? That's what I felt, right? And those feelings were real. And so for me, it was like asking the higher power, why do you have me here? And that was where that purpose and passion connected, because I knew my purpose. And I just didn't know exactly if I had the permission, if you will, like the belonging and the empowerment to operate with strength, right? And so through my, asking myself, why do you have me here, and realigning my purpose with my passion, it made it easy. And I never had those feelings again. But that is a common question that I'll have, like, because I'll get a promotion, I'll get a new client, why am I in this space? I belong in that space. And through the conversation of what is my purpose here now, because your purpose can evolve, right? And I think that occupation brings together purpose and passion and the evolution, because you consistently have to ask yourself, what am I doing here? What's my purpose here? And when you align on that, it makes everything so much easier.
Absolutely. Now, in your bio, you state that you're a community advocate. So, what are you doing in your community that gives you joy and
Yes. Well, that's a beautiful question. So, I am working with an organization called the Africological Institute, and their mantra is scholar activism. Scholar activism. So, we all know about different studies that are done. The studies they focused on mostly have been in the space of health equity, which is another big passion of mine. I have a chronic illness called it's Crohn's disease. And so I have a lot of passion, and had a lot of experiences, good and bad, in the healthcare industry. And so one of the things that we've been fighting for the last couple of years has been Medicaid. And so this organization uses studies to change laws and policies and regulations. And so they don't just believe in doing studies and papers for the sake of just doing them, but to really create change. And so as of late, while we didn't win everything in the Senate bill time frame this year, there were some great wins, and I would say it's been amazing to come back to my hometown community and fight for those that I used to say I got into this work to be a voice for the voiceless. I never disconnected from that, but sometimes the fight has to be at a different level. So, right, sometimes you have to fight at the state house. Sometimes you have to fight and know how to fight, right, with leadership and executives. And sometimes you have to communicate and understand the experiences from those on the ground. And so, my recent work with the Africological Institute and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has been to understand those that are on Medicaid, the experiences that they're having, and look at closing those gaps and really bringing services to people. So that's been exciting work. Some wins, some losses, but being on the front lines of supporting those in the community that can't speak for themselves is an honor.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Good for you and good for your community. So, Kelly, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to be sure and get in the program?
No, not at all. I think the only ad would be this financial wellness component. I think I wanted to maybe underscore the fact that people are going through a lot of different challenges right now. I mean, we talked about DEI, right? Which I think we're hopefully getting better in the space as we get into the year. But I don't think we talk enough about the shifts and what's happening with people and their finances because of the shifts in the marketplace, whether we're talking about organizations doing more with less, layoffs, all the different things that are people experiencing. So we didn't talk a lot about financial wellness, but just really seeing that financial wellness as an employee benefit and asking organizations and leaders to think about that, because this is not a topic that we've taught in school. And I have coached PhDs, right, that have found themselves in debt, right, over and over again because of our mindsets about money. So I guess I just wanted to maybe underscore that, one, we have that solution, but to connect dots around organizational and individual behavior change starts with our mindsets. And
Yeah.
when it comes to financial literacy or financial wellness, many of us did not talk about financial wellness at the dinner table, especially communities of colors or underserved communities. And so it doesn't matter your education level, you still may not have received that. And so, really looking at organizations to say, what can we do at a cost effective rate to really help engage, motivate, and ensure that our workforces are more productive, is to really consider financial wellness as an employee benefit and just add that to their packages, because we don't sell financial products. We really are just selling educational workshops to help empower your workforce.
That's such an impactful piece you just said there. I've often said that, leadership touches every single career and every single thing we do, but it's the least taught. But just what you said there, I think we should throw understanding finances in that same boat. Everybody,
Yeah.
everybody deals with it, but we don't have much education on that. And like you,
Mm-mm.
kind of been taboo to talk about those things in groups. So,
Mhm.
it's just one of those things that I think, yeah, it's a great point to make. So.
Yeah, legislation is changing now. They're starting to create a class in high school. So so hopefully it'll mean better things for our grandkids that to take care of us, right? They'll have a nice nest egg. So
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
yeah, we'll
Well, Kelly,
see.
at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Um, lead like you are creating a world for your future grandchildren
Yeah,
or your future generations. So if you lead in that space where you're not thinking of self, but you lead with the intent of thinking of others and the legacy you leave, you may lead very differently.
yeah, that's a great point. Well said. Well, Kelly, this has been a real pleasure. You're doing great things in the world, and it sounds exciting, and it's so needed. So, thank you for your part in that, and it's It's been great to hear your philosophies and what you're doing in this area. So thanks for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.